And now we're in the first week of December, and I took my father to the airport in San Jose, California, which was just over the hill from Santa Cruz. And he had a wheelchair waiting for him to help him get to the gate. And I was stunned. I was an Army brat. My father was an airborne ranger. The guy I remembered was the father of my youth, who was an infantry officer and a very strong person. Sure. And it set me back watching them wheel him away. And I drove back to the office from about a half hour from the airport back over to Santa Cruz. And I opened up a phone book and I looked up business brokers. And I think I called ABC Business Brokers. And they said, well, we can be there in 40 minutes. And I'm kind of like going, whoa. Anyway, we agreed to let them list the business. And they listed the business on December 22nd. And by the 23rd, we had multiple offers on the business. Wow. And I remember calling my dad, and I didn't really want to tell him why we were considering this or what was the trigger, I guess. But I said, maybe we should work to build the business up and give it more value, add more value, because we really hadn't thought about it. He said, well, why don't you take all that energy to building your new business? And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're the dad. That's right. Smart. And we did.
Hey everyone, I'm Palmer Higgins and welcome to the Big Time Small Business Podcast. I interview owners, operators, and founders of the small businesses you see every day but don't hear enough about. We talk about the obstacles they have faced, the successes they have earned, and where their business is going to inspire and inform you in your own career. On this episode, I talk with Bob Garver, co-founder of Wicked Joe, a wholesale roasting company, and Bard Coffee, a retail coffee shop, both located in Maine. After falling in love with the connections coffee can foster as an Army captain stationed in Turkey, Bob has spent the past quarter century sourcing, roasting, and brewing the best coffees he can find from around the world. From living on a boat with no kitchen or bathroom and plowing driveways on the side for supplemental income, Bob has remained focused on two things: relentlessly iterating on the perfect cup of coffee and positively impacting the entire coffee supply chain. Whether it is blind taste tests on every batch of coffee produced, or subsidizing farm expansion and community development at origin, Bob and his team continually strive to instill best practices throughout the organization. All right, Bob Garver, co-founder of Wicked Joe and Bard Coffee. Thanks a lot for being on the show, Big Time Small Business.
It's a pleasure, Palmer.
All right. So I got a lot of different things I want to talk about. I've written down some notes, sort of wide-ranging, business-specific, entrepreneur-specific, working with family-specific. But I want to start with a little bit of intro from you about the early days before Wicked Joe and Bard Coffee were a thing, back out west, when you started your first coffee house, and sort of what sparked for you the desire to start your own business and to have it be a coffee house and a roastery?
I think I'd always had an entrepreneurial bent. As a kid, I had paper route that I expanded and split into multiple paper routes and passed them on to my friends and things like that. I was in the service for a while, and when I got out, I felt like there was a moment. I was a single person. I didn't have any children, and I thought, this is my moment. And on Memorial Day weekend of 1992, I got in my Pontiac convertible, 1966, and I drove back to California, where I had been in language school previously and had made a lot of friends and come to really like the area. I moved drove across the country with the idea that I had a moment, and if I was able to start a business of almost any kind, that I could. That this was my chance. And so I gave myself until Labor Day, from Memorial Day to Labor Day.
That is a tight window.
If I wasn't in business by Labor Day, I had to come back and grow up and get a job.
Wow.
A real job. And I started investigating what kind of business I could do. What did I know how to do? One of the gifts that I got from being a young leader in the Army was that I was a lot of things that were out of my comfort zone were thrown at me, and you learn how to learn, and you learn how to solve problems, and you realize that you don't have to know everything. You have to know how to learn how to do everything, and so in a strange way, all of the additional duties and all of the different jobs that I was forced to take, as soon as I was actually proficient at the one I was doing, I would get moved into another job or thrown more responsibility at me. That made me probably overly fearless about the challenges of learning something new. So it was more about, this is my time. I'm going to do this. Now what am I going to do? Yeah. And I was looking at doing a brew pub. And I've told this story before, but I had a business plan and I thought a lot about it. And as a young guy who liked to have a beer now and again, I thought that sounded great. There was something though that was holding me back from pulling the trigger on doing it. I found a location, everything. And in the end, I tried to distill down later why I didn't do it. And I think that I didn't want to tell my grandmother I owned a bar. And that was that, but I liked the social aspect of that. And I thought a lot about what is it that I like about this. And I started thinking about coffee. I'd had some really remarkable experiences around coffee. I was stationed. I lived in Turkey, doing a job with NATO, and I'm a Turkish speaker, or was at that time. It's been a long time, but
very cool.
In that job, I had an opportunity to interact both professionally and personally very closely with my counterparts that were in the Turkish army, and just had some remarkable experiences around coffee. I would go to meet with my counterparts and we would sit down and have coffee. And I think the first meeting I had, I was frustrated because I had more things planned and scheduled, and I felt like we're just sitting here having coffee. I'm supposed to be doing stuff. My people are working, mm-hmm. and I'm sitting here having coffee. And I really, really came to embrace the moments and the connections that we made over coffee and chai tea in Turkey not only enriched me significantly personally, but they were game changers in terms of business and how I was able to get things done. For us, is being able to participate in that ritual with our customers,
sure.
To be a part of that. We understand that people, whether they're brewing it at home or they're having it at work with their workmates, or they're stopping by our coffee shop, no matter where, that's a kind of a meaningful ritual for people. They like to do it. It's an important part of their day. It's a small part, but it's still something they look forward to, and it means something to them. And we really like to be support that being the best possible experience that it can be, however we're involved.
Sure. Now that permeates a lot of what you do. Touring your facility earlier and talking about, and I'll use the word ritual of cupping, and going to origin and cupping with farmers and coming back and cupping with your employees on a quality control basis, but also then bringing them into your internal coffee house where you do a lot of R&D and testing. I see that ritual, that coming together of people sort of at every stage in the coffee journey, from origin through your roastery to your coffee shops, and here we are talking, having coffee together.
Yeah,
comes full circle.
It does. It's kind of, I don't really like the term. People use it for alcohol, social lubricant. But it's kind of a social lubricant. It connects people. People can talk over it and they can remember their conversations the next day. And which is also nice. But it really is. I really love the way it connects people.
Sure.
So
I actually want to go back to that, to when you opened the doors for Wicked Joe and Bard. So I'm going to flash forward from the coffee house on the West Coast, to moving back east and the genesis of Wicked Joe and Bard. And it's sort of a two-part question of sort of what made you make that plunge? And how do you think, and give a little bit of background for the listeners who maybe might not know about Wicked Joe and Bard, how do you think about those two companies? Because, Bard is a retail coffee house here in Portland. Wicked Joe, a roastery business, the way you do your own label plus private label roasting. So sort of talk about the inception part, and then how you, as the owner of both, along with your wife, Carmen, how you two think about those two businesses and how they sort of play off each other.
Great. I mean, it's interesting because as we were talking about the evolution and growth and change, I started roasting coffee on September 1st of 1992 in Santa Cruz, California. But in the early days, it was me. And a one-man show like most entrepreneurs. And I think Carmen and I had met when we were in college. We didn't go to the same college, but we met in our college days. And we had kept in touch over the years, and I think always thought a lot of each other. Carmen joined me. She left her career on the East Coast, and she joined me in my coffee business in, about 5 years in. And at that time, I was asking a lot. I was living on a boat in the Santa Cruz harbor, and she came out and was happy to let go of her things because we didn't have room for stuff other than us on this boat. And the boat did not have a galley, which is a kitchen, or a head. It was a racing sailboat. I had built a V-berth in the front with out of plywood and wood. And a cut up triangular foam mattress that I put up in front, and that's where I slept. And there were fold down metal and canvas cots for the crew to get cat naps on their trans-Pacific races and things that this boat did. So no, it was not a cushy boat, but we loved it, and we had to use and I remember to this day that Carmen embraced that. The idea of sacrifice for that we were able to invest in our business there, and but because we lived a joyful but a relatively lean life, and but she had to use, and as did I, there were public shower and bathroom facilities in the harbor area that's where what we had to use. And so for 2 years or so that we lived that way. But that's a common story and by the way, we loved doing that. So we didn't really feel like we were giving. It was a magical life down in the harbor there as liveaboards. I had lived aboard a boat in Monterey when I was just starting the business at first, where I rowed out off Fisherman's Wharf in Monterey to a 32-foot antique Danish teak sailboat, and so that wasn't a new thing. But I had done everything from lived in a tent next to one of my friends' houses where I could go in Carmel Valley, California, to living in the back of my coffee shop. You name it. I think that's a common story. Carmen embraced that, and we lived that way ever since. She came into the business and added skill sets that complemented mine. All the holes in my game she filled, and she had some of her own experiences that made this a very good fit for her. It was a very easy adjustment for us to work together. people will say, I could never do that, or
I hear that a lot.
Believe you do that.
Yep.
I would never, that's crazy.
Yep. I hear that a lot too.
And I understand that. I would say that at this point, certainly Carmen and I, because of our different personalities and whatnot, that are very complementary, there is sometimes, there are certainly moments when we don't agree on the direction or the decision that's in front of us, but we respect each other. We know that the other that we're in the same foxhole together, that are not only our values, but our goals are aligned more closely, that they couldn't be more aligned in terms of what we hope for our future. So to make a long story short, we were starting to feel with our daughters, we started to feel that we were a little more distant from our family than we wanted to be, but we never really thought about moving. But those things were there. But my father would come out to visit, and he was getting older, and we had started to have a little family tradition where he would come out for Thanksgiving and spend Thanksgiving with us and stay through the first week of December, help us pick our Christmas tree. And then he would go back east, and the rest of my family would have Christmas back there, and he would be with them for Christmas. And this was neat. And our daughter Frankie had just been born, and in September of that year, 2002, and now we're in the first week of December, and I took my father to the airport in San Jose, California, which was just over the hill from Santa Cruz. And he had a wheelchair waiting for him to help him get to the gate. And I was stunned. I was an Army brat. My father was an airborne ranger. He was a very interesting man. He was a professor of geography at West Point. And then he, different stage of his career. And then he went on to be the chief cartographer of National Geographic magazine. But the guy I remembered was the father of my youth, who was an infantry officer and a very strong person. Sure. And it set me back watching them wheel him away. And I drove back to the office from about a half hour from the airport back over to Santa Cruz, and I opened up a phone book and I looked up business brokers, and I think I called ABC Business Brokers. So the owner of the brokerage got on the phone. He said, they started talking to me, and they said, well, we'd really like to see your business. We'd like to visit you. And I said, well, I was just curious, but, when would you like to do that? And they said, well, we can be there in 40 minutes. And I'm kind of like going, whoa, this is again the first week of December. And they came over and visited. And this was all, though, I never had a conversation. We never had a conversation about leaving. So I showed up from the airport, and here's a business broker showing up. I felt like we still have an opportunity, because they said, oh, it'll take a year to sell a business. Don't worry. You don't have, because I'm sort of expressing those reservations. So anyway, we agreed to let them list the business, and they listed the business on December 22nd.
3 days before Christmas.
And by the 23rd, we had multiple offers on the business.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, this has gone from theoretical, I wonder, to okay. And I remember calling my dad, and I didn't really want to tell him why we were considering this, or what was the trigger, I guess. But I said, maybe we should work to build the business up and give it more value, add more value, because we really hadn't thought about it. I said, we're thinking about moving east. We'd like to be closer and all this stuff, and close enough to drive. And he said, look, I didn't know you were thinking about this, but if you are, why don't you what are you going to do when you move east? I said, well, we'll do coffee. We love doing coffee. And he said, well, why don't you take all that energy to building your new business? And I'm like, oh yeah, you're the dad. That's right. Smart. And we did. And so here we are, going from thinking, okay, it's going to take a year, we got a lot of time to think about this, to okay, like, where do we want to move to? We don't even know where we're going to move. And we talked about it a bit, and Carmen said, we'd both come to Maine as kids a few times and really loved it here. And some of the things that we really loved about living in that part of California where the redwoods met the coast, we felt like this was the place where we could be happiest. We felt like this was the best place for our daughters to grow up, but we understood that it was a more challenging place to start a small business.
Sure.
It was not a
Especially back then.
It was not a business decision that made us choose Maine. It was a family decision. But we felt like that as long as we had a chance, we had a lot of experience and we knew how to work hard. And there were some great coffee companies here at the time, but it wasn't a flooded market or anything. We felt like we'd have an opportunity. Most of the coffee to this day is not being produced by the fine coffee roasters of Maine. Most of the coffee consumed in Maine is produced by people outside of Maine still. So we felt like, that this would be a hard place to do business, but that we could have a good life here. That's when the work began again. That's when we started experiencing all the things that entrepreneurs experience. It does take twice as long and it does cost twice as much as you think. No matter how much you say that when you're planning, it does. It still does. And we had to make a lot of sacrifices here again. The sacrifices didn't stop. We had a limited amount of money. We weren't able to pay ourselves for a long time in our business here. And we had to do without some things. And, when I got to Maine, I put a plow on the front of the truck and I plowed for our neighborhood and other things. I had to do, you do anything you can to make a go of it. And that's what we did all over again. We tried to be as careful as we could with the way we spent money. At the same time, really investing heavily in the things that we believed in. Best practices is something we talk about. Best practices, which are not the least expensive always. So, we've always sort of really picked where we were going to spend enough or too much. But also trying to be very careful on the personal side.
Yeah. So how much of the vision when you came back east and you started Wicked Joe, how much of that vision was sketched out before and how much of it has evolved over time, right? So when I go through the tour of Wicked Joe, which we did recently, what stands out to me is an intense conviction on sustainability, best practices, quality, and a relentless pursuit of that consistent quality. And saying, one of the quotes you said to me is, if it's got a Wicked Joe label on it, it's certified organic, just hands down. So how much of that was there from the beginning, and how much of that grew and evolved over time?
I would say that growing up and learning coffee in Santa Cruz, that was just part of our DNA when we came here. So we knew what kind of business we wanted to build. Great question. We knew that we wanted to build a mission-based business. We knew that we wanted to sell organic coffees. We knew that we wanted to sell coffees that were best for the environment, that were sourced with consideration of the quality of life and ensuring that our partners were successful, our growers, the people that we source our coffees from, and that there was a safety net for them, which is why Fairtrade is so important to us. But I had a coffee shop in Santa Cruz, and there was a part of me that missed the direct connection that you get from that with customers. Whereas when you're wholesaling, you're selling to other people who then get the pleasure of serving that to your neighbors and friends, but you don't get that opportunity, that hospitality moment, that direct participation in that ritual that I talked about before. And also for us to utilize what we consider best practices in the brewing of it. We then established Bard Coffee with the idea that this would be an opportunity for us to again have that piece that we didn't have here, where we got to interact directly with customers and share the experience with them. They're different businesses. Wicked Joe is a wholesale business. We sell organic coffees and mostly Fairtrade coffees, and we have distribution throughout the United States. We're in 50 states and 18 distribution centers throughout the country, and we're selling a fair amount of organic and Fairtrade certified coffees all around the country, and we're very proud of that because there's tremendous impact that we can have there. But Bard is a place where, in order to do that, we have to, we're purchasing large lots of high quality coffee, but at Bard we're able to go even deeper, and we're selling very, very small lots of extremely high quality coffee.
Yeah.
That we're able to give the kind of respect for and treatment for.
Sure, yeah. So I want to dive deeper into that because there's definitely a huge impact, and you are on both sides, Wicked Joe and Bard, mission driven.
Yes.
But it's damn good coffee, and I would classify it as quality by intent. And you talk about the ritual and the art of coffee, but you spend 5 minutes in your roastery at Wicked Joe in the cupping room, and the level of the lengths that you go to ensure that your quality and is consistent, mm-hmm. and your blends are consistent, and the upper echelon of coffees that you're bringing through to Bard are that top notch is extraordinary. So can you talk a bit about your quality control processes and really, which brings in sort of the science to the art of quality consistency that through end to end from green coffee to brewing?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is something that's universal. We approach it through coffee, but any business has to be focused on quality. And, whether if you're a service, it doesn't matter what kind of industry you're in. You want to strive to be the best. And we do. We are always questing to, and striving for excellence. We will begin at origin cupping with our producers, and that's generally me doing that at origin. Those cuppings are always blind. We don't know what coffee, whose coffee we're cupping blind. And so we're choosing the coffees that are the highest quality without regard to who's making them or any of the other things. Once we've evaluated that we're selecting the best coffees, or that the choices, these are the best choices, we'll go out and meet with the people that are producing those coffees and get a sense of who they are. Are their values aligned with ours? How do they behave in their communities? Are the claims that they make about how they are producing their coffee claims that we'll share with our customers? We need to know that they're true. So we want to go visit them. And we'll do that when we're beginning or establishing a relationship. It always begins with which coffee tastes best. And then we'll move from there to get to know people. And then we'll make a decision. Do we want to source coffees from this producer? We'll make a very deliberate and intentional decision around who we source from. And then in the years that follow, in many cases, we're going back now we've been going for over a decade, baby. We've begun relationships with Cup of Excellence champions. That is a national champion for quality within a country. And
of which there are how many in a given year? One
in each country. There's only one champion. For instance, we have a relationship with a farmer, Bertilio Reyes, he's from El Cielito in Santa Barbara, Honduras. And he was the Cup of Excellence Championship in 2009 there. We began purchasing his coffee because it was the best. And we've worked with him in the years in between on numerous collaborations. And we were the first. That community now has buyers from all over the world and that are buying micro-lot coffees from this particular area and through the mill, Beneficio San Vicente, where these coffees come from. We were the first handshake, Bertilio and I, in that community. And we were the first exclusive relationship that was happening in that community. Since then, many others have followed. But that relationship has grown to the place where we've collaborated on varieties, on drying, and we've made contributions above and beyond the very high price that we pay for the coffee. And now we're buying from Bertilio's nephew, and we've invested in purchasing more, where we've loaned money so that Bertilio could purchase more land at the highest elevations where his farm are at from adjacent properties, so that that their family can benefit by being able to produce more and whatnot.
Sure, but none of that collaboration.
But we get better coffee,
right? But
that's the point.
Sure, but it's easy to say better coffee, and I think everyone has a perception of what that is. It tastes better, right?
Tastes better.
Sure. But there are intricacies when you get into good tasting coffee that is very hard to define, very hard to quantify. And before we pressed the record button, when I was walking through Wicked Joe, the conversation about the marriage of the relationships, the trust, that personal element matched up with the scientific method behind what is good coffee. And, we talk about cupping at origin, but then bringing it back. You guys cup every single bag, every single batch of coffee that goes through Wicked Joe's. That's every 150 pounds of coffee you guys are cupping to make sure that it's what it's supposed to be. And the roast comes out the way it's supposed to be, depending on the time of day, depending on the temperature of the roaster, at a level that I'm gonna equate to a sort of a master sommelier level when you talk about Q grader status, which is a level of coffee tasting that is the pinnacle of coffee tasting. And there are only a couple hundred in the US, and you have 2 of them. So the quality component of it is not by accident.
We're very proud. We have 2 certified Q graders who are calibrated with cuppers all over the world in our facility, that are cupping. The maximum batch size on our largest roasters is 150 pounds, but many of our batches are much, much smaller than that. And every batch of coffee that we roast is cupped by a Q grader. Blindly before it leaves the facility. But we start cupping coffees, and that is a constant throughout the process. And we begin cupping at origin when we're making a selection. And then when we visit every year, I'm cupping the coffees to see how they are relative to last year. It's a coffee that we are pretty sure we're buying because we bought it for a long time, and it's always awesome. But it's an agricultural product, and it changes, and there's difference in nuance. Before it ships, we'll get a sample, a pre-ship sample of those coffees that we will sample roast and evaluate to make sure it's what we cupped when we were there. And then once the coffee arrives, we will start bringing in that coffee into our roastery, and we'll start sample roasting it to develop the profile that we're going to roast it with. And so there's a lot of coffee cupping that happens then. And once we've developed a profile on the coffee, that's when it goes into production. And once it's in production, every single roast is cupped in order to determine and ensure that it is staying right in the lane that we've told our customers, if you buy this coffee, it's going to taste like this. So yes, we invest. And
then after all of that, you go and you brew it, which is a different process than cupping, brewed slightly differently to make sure that at the end customer, depending on how they brew it, it's going to stay in that profile too.
We do. And what happens is once the coffee is developed, on the cupping table, we're tasting it. We'll take it then into our training and experimentation room. In the cupping room, everything's always the same. It's really a lab. In the training and experimentation room, that's where we get to kind of really play with the coffee. And in particular, in those moments, we're going to brew it exactly how we believe our end customers are going to brew it. And we're going to make sure that what we've developed based on our cupping table, that if it needs even further tweaking, we're going to do it based on how it tastes as a brewed coffee or brewed as an espresso, if that's what we're working on. So yes, we will then go back and tweak. And the important thing is that every cupping, we have software. We're fairly sophisticated in the way we approach our quality control. And so every cupping, our QC director, Carrie Goodick, Carrie, who's a Q grader, will input her results from every single cupping and whether the coffee's in its lane. And if there's even a slight variance, we can make tweaks to the roast. So that goes into the software that we use on the roasters, the same software. We're keeping notes and comparing. And so we're always making small tweaks to our roast so the coffee never veers out of the profile.
Sure.
And when
you talk about the lab, I mean, so there's the Q grader, there's the cupping, there's the profile, there's the human element, albeit very sophisticated palette on the human element with the Q grader. But you also have some pretty sophisticated equipment to monitor the beans scientifically as well. Can you talk about some of that equipment you have in the lab and how that also impacts the roasting process? Sure.
We've got a lot of lab equipment, some that is more maybe common that smaller roasters have. And we're very proud of what we're doing, but we're a small Maine business. Mm-hmm. We use moisture meters to measure the moisture in the green coffee, because if the moisture changes because, or there's a change because that coffee has been resting longer as green coffee, that we'll make adjustments because it'll roast differently. We have particle size analyzers to evaluate that our grinders are operating properly if we're grinding coffee for people, and that we may need to make an adjustment to the grinders, because as grinders, burrs change and they may vibrate out of adjustment or something. So we're always looking at those things. We have oxygen Headspace Analyser, which is a piece of equipment that most coffee companies don't have, but we nitrogen flush all of our bags that we do for retail. And we want to make sure that the nitrogen flushing is happening properly. And the only way to do that is to measure how much oxygen is in the bag. And so we have that equipment. We don't send our stuff out to a lab to evaluate that. We do it regularly in our place to make sure that everything's always working properly. We don't want to find out after there's a problem and somebody's telling us. So we use handheld refractometers to measure TDS in our brewed coffee. We use near infrared photospectrometers to measure the degree of roast, to make sure that our roasts are staying in the same profile. That's really looking at the color, where you grind it, where you have a whole bean color and a ground color on the coffees. And you can see exactly whether it'll measure exactly, is it the same darkness or lightness. But in the end, all of those things can say that the coffee's good. But the point is, it's still all about cupping. That stuff helps us. It helps to identify if there's an issue and where we need to be. Mm-hmm. But only the cupping is always the final arbiter. Everything has to be cupped. And so it doesn't really matter whether our Agtron photospectrometer is telling us whether that coffee is roasted exactly the same way. It may not have gotten there the same way,
Sure.
And we've got the software on our on our roasters that we can see if there's any tweak in how that coffee roasted. We can see the roast curve, and so, but we cup. So for all of that, and it's very valuable, and it helps us, and it adds layers that we invest in quality. That's all invest in quality and consistency. But it's about people and tasting and cupping and using that equipment properly. When we talk about quality, you can talk about cup score, high cup scores and things like that. But if you want to distill it down, does it taste good? Yeah, is this taste really great? And does it taste the way our customers? Are we delivering on the promise we've made to them. And so we want to make sure that we deliver on that promise for people that go out of their way to either find it at a grocery store or to purchase it online, that every time they buy our coffee, it's going to be the same
Sure.
quality, and to taste the same.
Sure.
We aren't perfect. We can't be perfect. But I think something we talk about at Bard or at Wicked Joe, we're humans. Humans we're just not made to be perfect. And we will make mistakes, but we will never make mistakes, or we won't accept making mistakes because we didn't try hard enough, because we didn't care enough about quality. So that's like the goal. The goal is to never make mistakes because we didn't do our best and try hard, and that we didn't use best practices along the way. And all of the things that I just described, we're back to best practices. What's best practice for making sure that our coffee, we're making sure that we do everything we possibly can to make sure our coffee is always top notch.
Sure. So you mentioned that you and Carmen, while different personalities, have a similar vision for Wicked Joe and for Bard. So what is that? So what does the future have in store? What is the ideal future for you, for Wicked Joe, for your people look like?
We don't want to be a big company. We want to be a great company. We just want to be great. And we want to be a company that our children are proud of us for creating and building, and that our community is proud that we're part of, that our staff members are proud to be a part of. I don't know that we ever expected that we would be doing a lot of things we're doing, but when you work hard and on the things we've talked about, on quality and all those things, opportunities come to you that you didn't necessarily anticipate. And we say, okay, do we want to do this? Is this going to make us better? Is this going to make us happier? How is this going to benefit our stakeholders? Is this going to make is this going to benefit our farmers? Is this going to benefit our staff members? And if we can't say yes to those things, we're not going to do it. So there's a lot of opportunity. There are a lot of opportunities out there that we say no to because we don't feel like it's really in our lane, or we're learning that that as we grow, because of the model, because of the way we're built, the more coffee we grow, the more money goes into the communities. So, for instance, with Fairtrade, people don't know this, but not only right now, Fairtrade farmers are earning significantly more than non-Fairtrade farmers, generally speaking.
Can you quantify that for the listeners?
Unless they are producing micro-lot coffees or coffees that are outside of the normal purchasing methodology, which generally has a C market. The C market is the coffee market, which is a coffee futures market, and ordinarily coffees are purchased based on where the C market is, with a differential that it can include quality and that will include quality and all those things. So coffee is always purchased based on cup score and quality, and all those things are factored in, but the baseline is way below where Fairtrade. Where the Fairtrade baseline is significantly higher than where the market is now. So when we visit our farmers, they're extremely grateful for that, because the safety net that's intended to provide and to ensure that they can earn a living wage no matter what, that is there for them. Now, when the C market rises and it hits the Fairtrade minimum price that is right now 40 to 50 cents higher for conventional coffee. Now, when you're talking about organic coffee, you're talking about another significant leap for the minimum that you can pay. And on top of that, you're paying for quality and whatnot, and community premiums. There's an additional 20 cents per pound that goes to the communities that we purchase on top of what the farmers are paid. So last year alone, the purchases that Wicked Joe made resulted in over $200,000 in community premiums going to our partner communities, that they would get, the members of the cooperatives will get together and vote on how they want to spend that money to benefit their community. It's not the most profitable model, to build in all the giving and support and investment in quality. All the things that we do cost money that we don't recoup it all. We certainly don't. It's certainly much more costly on a transactional basis, but we're not a transactional company. We're in it for the long haul with our partners, and it makes us better. So the more that we can sell, the more we can purchase. And the more of those other family members that we now know by face because we visit, the more of them can then get into the association or the cooperative, and they can get higher prices. So we see that there's a direct impact. Now, it's not just a theoretical idea that more people will benefit. We know the people. We know we know specific people like Antonio Domingo Cota's son in Guatemala, one of our Fairtrade organic farmers that has micro-lot quality coffee that we segregate from all the other coffees in that association because we work closely with that association. His son wants to join the association because he can get a much higher price for his coffee. And he's really wanting us to intercede and to get him moved up the line to get into the association. So we know that that's a face that if we can buy more coffee, that young person can have his family benefited by that. So we're excited for that opportunity, and that makes us eager to see what the possibilities are and to explore some of the things like tea that I kind of let go of in the past, but I've been working on for quite a while now because we feel like, wow, there's real opportunity to add value like we do with the model that we do in the communities that we're going to purchase tea from. So we've begun sourcing teas. You can taste them at Bard Coffee now. Many of the teas that we're sourcing. But there's an opportunity for our people now that assuming that we're successful in that endeavor and in building that business, that there's going to be an opportunity for people within our organization to now have a new challenge and a new opportunity, a new place to learn and a new place to grow and thrive. So it is, so the answer is, I guess, that every step of the way we're still saying, is this going to make us better? Or are we still going to be proud of our company? But now the calculus includes, are we, will this add more impact?
So I want to close up the interview with a couple questions that I ask everybody. And I purposely didn't give you a heads up here so I can get the unvarnished answer. And the first question is, imagine you were able to press a magic pause button of life for 4 months. You didn't have to do anything related to day-to-day of Wicked Joe or Bard, but you had to allocate that time to further Wicked Joe and or Bard. How would you allocate that time?
I feel like I kind of get to do that now. Probably one of the benefits of having the staff that we now have. In the old days when we started the business, I roasted every pound of coffee that we sold probably for over a decade. Even when we moved here to Maine, it was me on the roaster initially. And I bagged most of it. And we were stuck in sort of always in the weeds, it felt like, not able to really look long-term and strategically at our business because we were so busy. And this is something that anybody who's starting a business probably feels a lot, that you're just so busy that you can't see the forest through the trees thing. And we did that a lot. We've got incredibly talented people doing our day-to-day. And it's not just Carmen and I having to do that anymore. That makes our business better because we get to focus on doing those things. So that's my daily life. And that's probably why I like it so much. I want everybody around me to be better at what they're doing than I am. Because I always had to be a jack of all trades, as you are in your business. Well, I feel that way now. I mean, I'm like surrounded by people that are smarter than me. They're really good. And that enables me to do probably that kind of stuff, which is what I want to do, by the way, is to think about what are the next steps? How are we going to How are we going to be better? That's why we're starting to source our own teas. I started that process years ago. I've done certifications on tea and evaluating tea and understanding tea. I've traveled to Origin, and we're sourcing teas from tea gardens and tea factories that process the teas, so we've begun to apply the model that has been so successful for us with coffee and so joyful to sourcing teas. That's a good example. I've really been able to do that. I've set up, you've been there, I've set up like a tea room that is my tea sanctuary where we've got everything. It's just like a total mad scientist experimentation room and tasting and cupping and quality control room just for tea. No coffee allowed in. That's an example of where I've been able to go and explore and invest my time and energy into areas that I think can be really, really beneficial to all of our stakeholders, most specifically our own staff and the people in the building that work with me, either at Wicked Joe or Bard Coffee.
Yeah, that's a great answer and unique one for the podcast. All right, last one here. Similar in terms of allocating a resource. This one's going to be monetary, though. Imagine $1 million just dropped on your doorstep, but the stipulation was you had to reinvest it back into Wicked Joe or Bard, or both. How would you allocate that money?
I think that I would probably split it up into some different categories. Probably a chunk of that would go towards just doing fun stuff with our staff, just making life joyful by creating opportunities for experience stuff. We do a staff appreciation day where we like to go out and do something fun and that kind of thing. Go out on a boat together, a schooner or whatever. We work hard. We always said we wanted to be a work hard, play hard company. I would dedicate some of that to playing harder, because I think that it's got to be fun. Sure. We want it to be fun, and it doesn't always feel that way because we feel a responsibility to our customers, and more customers are coming on, and we want to fulfill their orders and get the quality right, and so everybody, it feels like we're always really, really trying hard, and we're not stopping to have a beer as often as possible, that kind of thing, and get our hands dirty outside or something. I would want to do more of that. I would rent a plane and take everybody to visit our producers, and you know what I mean?
Sure.
And give them that, because man, when you feel that, you want to do better because you understand, and they're people to you. That you know them now, not from a picture on our wall in our roastery, but you know them personally. And now all of a sudden you care more about quality. You care more about that. We talk a lot about our responsibility in that supply chain at the end when we roast or we serve coffee to our staff members, because we see all the work and we feel like we're sort of running the last leg of a marathon relay, and we've gotten past the baton, and if we don't do our job, then we're not respecting the work of all those people that went before us. We're not understanding that, and so I would take all of our staff as often as possible to Origin, maybe even some of our customers, and treat them to that. And share that with them so that they could see that and understand that, walking their land and hearing their stories about how that farm has been in their family for generations, and how without the mechanism of fair trade and the access to markets that they have, they wouldn't exist, that they wouldn't be able to farm those lands, and that way of life would go away. To hear that directly, not hearing it from me or from some literature that's put out, to hear people say, please, I want to be a member of the association, but they can't, but they don't have room because they're going to sell X number of containers this year. If they could sell X plus 2, that's a lot of farmers. So are people hearing that? That's a very long answer because I get excited about that kind of stuff. I
can tell.
I would include that. So playing, but also getting our people down there, because you can't unsee that stuff.
Awesome.
It changes you.
Awesome. Well, Bob, thanks a lot for the time on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Palmer.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Big Time Small Business Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a review and share the show with a friend. To access show notes and subscribe to our distribution list, be sure to visit us at chenmarkcapital.com/podcast. That's Chenmark, CHENMARK, capital.com/podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at Chen Holdco, CHEN Holdco. Last but not least, we'd love to hear from you, so please drop us a line at podcast@chenmarkcapital.com. Thanks a lot.